Hello, I am Jyotika. Welcome to Excelling Psychology. In today's class, we will do in details Ash's research on conformity, the original experiment. I'm going to be doing the base experiment in this video, not the variations. This is a follow up from my previous video in which I've explained the theory of types and explanations of conformity. I hope you've seen that video. Otherwise, do see it to understand what conformity is basically, because then only you'll be able to understand this study well. I know that in both the UK and the international syllabus, you're not asked to learn the original study, you're asked to learn the variations of the study. But the fact is that the paradigm or the way the experiment is done for the variations is the same as the original study, only with slight modifications. So, inevitably, even if you just go to learn the variations, you do learn about the original study. You have to learn it. It's not explicitly mentioned, but you have to do it. So, that's what we'll do in this class. In the first part of this class, I will explain the study to you thoroughly, step by step. And in the next part, we will write this answer, outline and evaluate research into conformity. I have mentioned previously also in videos in which I have done answer writing that for these type of answers, when they say research, they mean you can cover any theory or any studies. So it isn't necessary that you use Ash's original study only to answer this question. But if you're learning the study anyways, it makes for a very good answer for this question. This question has been asked repeatedly in the international curriculum for 20 marks, in the original curriculum, UK curriculum for 12 marks, 16 marks. You can see the past paper repeatedly, it has come across years. So once you've learned the ASH study, which anyways you have to learn, you can write a very good answer to this question from the study itself. So today we'll practice doing that as well. Let's begin understanding ASH's research. I'll just do a quick recap of that concept from the previous video, which is relevant to this study. And the concept is compliance. In the previous video under types of conformity, we had seen that the conformity which we show, that is when we follow the majority, because of pressure that we experience, force that we experience to, like we have to follow them. That is what is known as compliance. So for example, if I am feeling forced to wear certain type of clothes because all my friends are wearing it, I know that they will not appreciate it, they'll get upset with me if I don't wear the same type of clothes. So I'm feeling pressurized to wear the same clothes, and that's why I'm wearing them, though I don't feel like actually wearing those clothes. Then I am complying with their demands, which they may have not made explicitly, but it is a demand of the situation that I wear those clothes. Ash's research looks into compliance. Now, whenever we learn any study, we should learn it in a very structured way. As I had explained in the previous video, I hope you have learned your research methods before coming to the main content of the syllabus. So, you have learned about how any study is built. Any study follows the structure of aim, procedure, results, and conclusion. And when you write in the answers also, like I just showed you the essay question, this is the format in which you should write about the study. This is a good organized way of writing it. So why not learn it in the same way? Why not learn it in terms of these sections? So as we go through the study, I will keep on pointing out these sections to you. So we'll mark these sections where they are. Not only that, even the elements of research methods I will keep pointing out. So where we see the sample, sampling technique, any ethics, any control, standardization, research method, we will keep on annotating and pointing out those things. I strongly recommend you learn that way as well. When you're learning with me or otherwise when you're learning, never learn passively. Like just don't keep on reading and rereading what is given. Hold that pen in your hand, keep on marking, just like I'm showing you in this lesson how to mark. Keep on marking that way. Because when you mark these things, when you mark these sections, you learn how to write this way in the essay. And when you mark those small research methods and elements explicitly in the study, if any question is asked in the paper, like for this study, I know they will not ask you specific questions, but say it is a study from which they can ask you, it's a specification study from which they can ask you the exact sample or about any particular ethic that was maintained in the study. Because you've marked it, you have explicitly taken a look at it while learning, it will be very easy for you to answer those questions. Not only that, when you mark things like you mark the sample, ethics, control, standardization, when you're writing the EO3 part of the essay, when you're writing an evaluation, those points come very quickly to your mind. And in the peel format, you're able to explicitly link and contextualize the points because you took note of them very carefully when you were learning the study. So that is how you should be learning. As I say in every video, don't look at this video from the point of view that you need to memorize whatever I'm teaching you. See how I am marking the study. See how I'm teaching you about the study. And try to follow the same in any study that you are learning. So let's begin with the aim of ASH's study. The aim as presented here is to study reactions to group pressure. Okay, so when I'm learning, I will mark this as the aim of the study. This part is the aim. Ash basically wanted to investigate if we pressurize people in a group situation, how will they react? What will their behavior be in response to that? As I said earlier, this is about compliance. Now let's see exactly what is done in the procedure. Step by step, we look at what is happening in this study. Firstly, Ash recruited 123 male students for this study. Okay, so this is the sample. 123 male students. The number is very easy to remember, 1, 2, 3. And anyways, for this study, I strongly recommend you learn the specifics, especially just like me, if you intend to write the essay answer from this study, it is good if you know specific details about the study. Okay, so do remember there are 123 participants. Also remember that they are males only. These are the type of details you need to remember. Earlier, if you see studies on social influence, like even if you look at Milgram's study, males have been selected because the type of pressure that is created in these studies, the potential of emotional distress, researchers used to think that males are better candidates for this study. But because we have learned research methods, we know that when our sample is very selective, it is low on representation, which makes generalizability difficult. Not only should you be marking the elements like I'm writing where's the sample. When you've done your research methods, you should keep on evaluating also in your mind. This study specifically, they will not ask you in the paper because it's not in the specification. So they won't ask you a direct question like, was the sample from Ash's study generalizable or not? But if it were a study which was in the specification, they could ask you such questions. So as you go along, only if you keep on evaluating in your mind, it becomes very easy to write those answers. Also, even if this is not going to be asked directly in the board paper, why not use it for practice? Why not go through this study also in that way? In fact, my students are from the Oxford International Curriculum. So many of them have done assignments on this study. Like because in the Oxford textbook, this study is given a lot of focus. It's one of the key studies in that textbook. So that's why teachers are giving full-fledged assignments from this study only to students, that they have to write their 20 markers from this. So especially helpful to you if you're an international student. So I won't do this all the time in this video, but just to give you an example of how you should think. When you're seeing the 123 participants in your mind, immediately from what you've learned in research methods, it should come that, okay, this is a large sample size. So overall generalizability should be good considering the sample size. But then when they're only males, so it's a skewed sample. There's no representation of females. So whatever results we're going to see in this study will not be directly generalizable to females. So this way you can keep on thinking also actively about the study as you go through it. And then they were informed that they were participating in a visual perception task. Firstly, this is the instruction which is given to participants. At the time of taking their consent, this is what they are told, that this is what the study is about. But immediately we see this also makes for deception. So you must have learned your ethical guidelines. You know that if we mislead participants or we hide something from them, that is counted as deception. The aim of the study is to investigate group pressure. But what are participants being told? Are they being told that it is about group pressure? No. They are being told it's about visual perception. That means the true purpose of the study is being hidden from them, which is an issue of deception, and it is also an issue of not taking correct consent from participants. Informed consent is weak in this study. Just for your knowledge, you should know this is a classic study. These type of studies which are done around the 60s, that time ethical guidelines were not very strong. So if we are wondering how come this study was done if ethical guidelines have been breached, because at that time there was no strict necessity of having ethical approval before doing these studies, and later I'll explain to you in terms of cost benefit analysis. The benefits of the results drawn from this study are very great, and it justifies any deception or any lack of informed consent that is there. For now, we'll continue with the procedure. So what is happening? Keep on visualizing in your mind. The procedure of any study becomes easy to remember. Or keep yourself in place of the participant. So imagine you're the participant in this study. You've gone to the laboratory. The researcher is telling you, okay, now you have to do a visual perception task. Next, what the researcher tells you is that you have to sit at a table. So there's this big conference type of table there, and you're going to be seated. In many textbooks, there's an image also of the table, so you can take a look at it. When you go to sit at the table, you see that there are 6 or 8 people besides you who are sitting at the table. So including you, there are 7 or 9 people at the table. Now you're a participant, and what you're told is that these are also participants just like you. They have also come to participate in the study. So you believe that you're sitting in the study with other participants, and now you will have to do some visual perception task. Now let's see what the task is. The task is looking at 2 cards. So there was some sort of I don't know, actually it's given differently. Some places they say there was a projector screen and that is where these cards were displayed, or what I believe is that the cards were just held up and shown to the participants at the front of the table. So anyways, what participants get to see is 2 cards, which you can see on this diagram. Like this is one card which they get to see on the left. It's called Exhibit 1 when they have attached it with the report of the study. And this is the second card. So now again, imagine you're the participant. You get to see 2 cards in front of you. The researcher is holding them or they're on the screen. You get to see both the cards together. One card is on the left and one is on the right. On the left card, you see a single line is there. And on the right card, you see there are 3 lines. Now what the researcher is asking you to do is identify which comparison line is matching the standard line's length. This first line which is there, this is referred to as the standard line, and these lines which are there, they are called the comparison lines. So as you're looking at the lines, the researcher is asking you to think about which line is matching from the comparison lines with the standard line. So now actually imagine you're the participant and think, what do you think is the correct answer? Isn't it very obvious that A is the correct answer? I mean, B is very short and C is very long. So it's a very simple question that you're being asked. From a paper point of view, do use good terminology like standard line, comparison lines when you're explaining the study. So make sure you're explaining using good terms for clarity. When the examiner is reading, they should clearly understand. Many students are not able to explain clearly what the task is. So understand it well, read carefully how they have described in the textbook, and try your best to describe in the same way. So as I just mentioned, the answer is very clear and obvious. Do you think if you were the participant in this study, you could make a mistake in this type of answer? Do you think by chance you would give the answer as B or C? Seems very difficult to goof up on this type of an answer. It is so very obvious that you would say anyone can say that A is the correct answer. Do keep this in mind. It is key to the study. So this what we have seen here is the task of the study. These few lines which we have seen, these make for the task. In this way, there are 18 trials which have to be done on this study. So if you're one participant, say in a group of 7 participants, you have to do this similar task 18 times. Like it is in the same way, not these exact cards, but similar cards are shown to you one after the other. On every trial, you get to see one standard line and 3 comparison lines. So you can take it as there are 18 trials or 18 tests in this way. You have to see 18 cards in the same way and give 18 answers. That is your work as the participant. So this is what happens in the study. But now the question is, where is the manipulation in this study? Like, where is group pressure coming into the picture? So now we get to see about that. To create group pressure on the participants, Ash had already devised the experiment in a way that participants were going to have to face some opposition, which is not going to be explicit, but it was inherent in the study. Firstly, the participant believes, like we saw, that they are sitting with other participants. They are not sitting with other participants. They do not know that they are sitting with confederates of the researcher. Confederates are simply assistants of the researcher. Sometimes they are called confederates, sometimes they are called stooges. So depending on which textbook you are referring to, you might see an alternate term like assistants or stooges instead of confederates, means the same thing. So the people who were already seated at the table when the participant joined in, they were the assistants of Ash, and the participant did not know that. That is why the participant is often called a naive participant. Naive means innocent participant who does not know that in this way a deceptive situation has been created. Again, this point counts for deception. The fact that there were confederates around when the participant thought that participants were there. Now, because they are assistants of the researcher, there must be some purpose of keeping them there. Ash had already instructed them before the study that they are to deliberately give wrong answers to such a simple question which was there. How the experiment was set up was the genuine participant or the naive participant's turn would to answer the question of which line is matching the one on the left. The genuine participant's turn would come either last, after everyone had answered. Everyone had to give their answers aloud. So after they all turn had got completed, then the participant would get to answer, or second last. Sometimes the participant would be the second last person to answer. So these research assistants, before the participant could answer, they all would give the wrong answer. Imagine yourself again. This is why you need to imagine yourself, then you can understand the participant's plight. You can very obviously see that A is the correct answer. But let's say, for example, before you, 6 people are answering and they all are saying B is the correct answer. Wouldn't you be surprised? How come everyone is thinking that B is the correct answer? You might come to doubt, are you seeing the cards correctly? Is there something wrong with what you are seeing? Or you might just wonder, how can they all be mistaken? Even if you know that they're giving the wrong answer, so you believe they are not able to see properly, you would hesitate in giving the right answer yourself. It would feel so odd. Everyone's saying B and you're the only one who's saying A. What if they all start staring at you? What if they make fun of you in some way? Or what if in general it just sounds silly or odd to give the wrong answer? This is the type of pressure which is being created. Directly, participants are not being coerced into saying the wrong answer. No one's forcing them to give the wrong answer. But indirectly, by everyone unanimously giving the wrong answer, that pressure is being created on the participant deliberately. Now we saw every participant has to give 18 answers. Ash knew that if on all 18 trials the remaining assistants they are going to give wrong answers, it will become obvious. Like participants will come to understand that purposely these people are giving the wrong answer. This is some fishy setup which is going on here. So to make it look convincing, to make it look realistic, he just told the assistants to give the wrong answers on 12 trials, not on all 18 trials. So these 12 trials on which the assistants deliberately give the wrong answer, they came to be known as critical trials. Why critical? Because these are the trials on which the participant experiences pressure. On the rest of the 6 trials on which the assistants are giving the right answer, there's no pressure on the participant to give a wrong answer. But on these 12 trials, there is pressure on them to give the wrong answer. So these are the critical trials. Ash was going to analyze the results only of these trials in his data analysis, because the rest of the trials are not of his concern. They don't show anything about compliance. Here we see how control has been maintained. Validity increases here because Ash is making sure that the deception is not very obvious. He's curtailing demand characteristics in this way. But at the same time, it also makes for deception of participants. We know that deception and demand characteristics are inversely related. So wherever we see deception is taking place, definitely their demand characteristics are being reduced. So critical trials is a strong point where both elements apply. So in 6 trials, out of these 12, when they are saying 6, they mean out of these 12 critical trials, participants deliberately selected a longer line as the match, and in 6 trials, they selected the shorter one. So if this is the trial which is taking place, which we see on the diagram, in those trials in which participants are giving the wrong answers, the critical trials, on half the trials, they would say B is the correct answer. So say there are 6 assistants who are sitting, the participant's turn is 7th to answer. So these 6 people, before the participant can say his answer aloud, in their turn, they all say B is the right answer. On the remaining 6 trials, they say C is the right answer. So the wrong answer they give by selecting the longer line. So this is how they answer turn by turn. Everyone has to report aloud so the participant can hear these wrong answers. Also, so that it doesn't become obvious that they're deliberately giving the wrong answer, they're answering in some pattern, these trials were interspersed randomly. So randomly on 6 out of the 12 critical trials, participants would select B, and randomly on, assistants would select B, and randomly on 6 out of 12 trials, they would select C. As I've already mentioned, they've explained it here that the original participant, the naive or actual participant, used to be seated second last or last, so that his turn would come that way. And in that way, he had to hear the incorrect answers either all the time, like all the remaining people were giving the wrong answer, or at least majority he would hear giving the wrong answer before his turn would come. So this is how pressure was being created on the participant. This is the manipulation which is taking place in the study. Now, just like we have seen in Milgram's research, if you have seen it already, as participants do these type of social influence tasks, so be it like the Daly and Latani studies, Milgram studies, or Ash's study, we see that they are showing some influence, but they don't show it with ease. When their body language is observed, it becomes apparent that they are under too much pressure. Their body language gives out that even if they're giving the wrong answer, just to agree with the majority and not stand out like an odd person, when they're giving those wrong answers, they're not giving them with ease. They are feeling very disturbed in giving those wrong answers. Like the conflict which is going on within them, that should they give the right or wrong answer, becomes very apparent from their mannerisms. So in this study, also unknown to participants, Ash was observing their body language, and what he found is that they were looking increasingly anxious about their answers. Imagine you're the participant, and one after the other, randomly these critical trials keep on coming up. So one trial people are giving the wrong answer, then say they're giving the right answer, again right, again on another trial they start giving the wrong answer. What must be your condition at that time as a participant? You can't understand what is happening. It all feels very real because it has been set up in a very realistic way. So you just can't figure out why are people giving the wrong answer. Am I making a mistake in seeing things? Is something wrong with their vision? So this anxiety used to become apparent in the participants' body language. They became increasingly anxious, conscious about their answers. Maybe their tone of voice was also sharp when they were answering, indicating like that high pitch, indicating that they are feeling stressed, and maybe they would stammer or just give the answer a little slowly, which shows that they are hesitating or thinking a little before answering. They are not able to answer freely. So stress was becoming apparent from their body language, that the pressure is actually having anxiety effects on them. This counts under the ethical issue of psychological harm. Participants are being caused at least temporary harm in this study, which is apparent from the stress which they are experiencing. Now coming to the data analysis part, we have seen that ASH is going to consider only the critical trials for analysis. So what ASH did was measured how often the naive participants gave the same incorrect answer as the confederates. That means he's done a simple frequency check. He's calculated the frequency of giving incorrect answers on the critical trial, simply counted how many times participants are giving wrong answers. Obviously, the right answer, which is very apparent, if they are not giving that, instead they are selecting the line which the others are selecting. That means they have given into conformity. They have yielded into conformity in the situation. So this was a good measure or good operationalization of conformity in the study. Now, what we've seen so far, this was data analysis. And whatever I have marked after the aim, whatever I have marked in green here, from the beginning till here, this is the procedure of the study. In between interspersed is like one result of how participants are showing some signs of anxiety, but besides that, all of it was the procedure. So now you can also see what comes within the procedure, anything in the step-by-step methodology, including control, sample, task to be done, instructions being given, ethical considerations, all that make for the procedure of any study. Now let's start looking at the results. Whenever it comes to results, the most common question is, do we need to memorize the exact figures which are given? I will strongly suggest yes. Depends what is your goal. Like I've told you, have a clear goal in mind. If you want to answer the essay questions using ASH's study, it is very, very desirable that you give exact figures. What ASH found is that the overall conformity rate was 37%. This is a result which is obtained by combining the data from all participants across all the trials which were conducted. There were 123 participants. Each participant was participating in 18 trials. So 123 into 18 trials must have been done. You don't need to remember that figure, but you need to know how to interpret this result. So out of these 123 into 18 trials which were done, 37% of critical trials were such in which participants gave the wrong answer, just like the majority. So not on all critical trials means not all the time that the confederates were giving the wrong answer, the participant was also giving the wrong answer. It was not like that. But on 37% of the trials when the assistants gave the wrong answer, the participant also gave the wrong answer. Now it might seem like a low percentage, like we might feel, okay, 37%, about 1/3. That just means that, there's not much conformity, like it's not 100% conformity. But you need to keep in mind the nature of the task when you think about the result. The task is so very simple. As we saw right at the beginning, there is no scope of making a mistake on the task. Despite that, despite the answer being very obvious, if even on 37% of the trials, people are giving the wrong answer, it just goes to show how much pressure is created in such a situation. Imagine the very right answer is in front of your eyes, it is apparent, you are seeing it, and still 1/3 of the time you're giving the wrong answer. Why? The only reason is because you're feeling pressurized and nothing else. So pressure does have a very strong impact on the person. Even if the results on the surface, they seem to be not a big deal, they are a very big deal, like I just explained. But we have to keep in mind there are individual differences. Like I said, this is the combined result across all participants. Does not mean that every participant showed 1/3 conformity. Some participants must have shown a lot of conformity, like say on almost all the trials they were agreeing with the majority. And there must be participants who never agreed with the majority. So 37% is like the average, the mean, which you have studied. And you have also studied about range. So there's also a range which we need to consider the dispersion to get the full picture of the results. So in terms of individual differences, It was found that 5%, 1 in 20 participants, they conformed on every critical trial. Every participant is facing 12 critical trials. These 5% participants are those on each of the 12 critical trials they gave the wrong answer, just like the majority. These were highly conforming individuals. They had a very high level of conformity. So we can infer from this, like the larger theoretical generalization is that some people in the population must be feeling extreme pressure when the group is doing, the majority is doing something, so much so that they just cannot resist. They have to only do whatever the majority is doing. Not all people, but about 5% people are such. And the other result they found is that 25% of people were entirely independent, means 25% participants, or one fourth as they are saying, was such that on all the 12 critical trials that they faced, they never ever gave the wrong answer. They always gave the right answer, regardless of the answers being given by the majority. Again, if we have to do a broader generalization from this about conformity, what this tells us is there are about one fourth, like quarter people in the population whom we can expect, like if we can generalize the results of this study, there'll be one fourth people in the population who never ever given to conformity, who have that resistance in them that even if the group is creating some pressure, they can absolutely refuse it. They have no levels of conformity within them. They are zero when it comes to conformity. What might be making a person this way? Is it desirable or not? Sounds very desirable, definitely. It seems very good, especially when the task is like this, when it's a matter of being right or wrong. It seems very desirable to not be conforming at all. But is it always desirable? And what makes a person resist conformity is what you get to see ahead in the chapter. But it's always good to note and think like this about the results, like I'm explaining to you, because one, it creates a motivation in you to learn psychology. Many times students say psychology is a drab subject, it's just about memorizing, because you don't really think about what these results are telling you about human behavior. So always sit and think to understand the value of the subject. Secondly, when you think like this, later on, when you learn topics like, I told you how conformity can be resisted, or is it desirable to not conform, you can link into that, like you can connect with what you've learned here. So makes the chapter more holistic or more comprehensive for you. You see where things are going when you think about deeply about whatever is being presented. So now, what we have seen in pink, these are the major results of the study. We know in laboratory experiments we have learned that quantitative data is collected and analyzed. That's a feature of laboratory experiments. So these are the quantitative results. Earlier, what we saw about stress, those were qualitative results. Those were like secondary observations. These are the key results of this study. Another secondary type of observation is done at the debriefing stage. Definitely after the study got over, Ash must have explained to the participants the deception that had been done, why he had to do that deception. He must have clarified any doubts in their mind. So at that stage, he asked them, while debriefing them, like a very quick interview he took of each participant, and he asked them to explain their responses. He wanted to know the reasoning behind why they had given the wrong answers. Ash knew definitely that they did not believe that the wrong answers were the correct answers. It was, the answers were too obvious for them to feel that the what the majority is saying is right. So then why is it that they did not give the right answers on at least some of the trials? So what these participants told Ash is that just as he had suspected, they knew that the group is giving the wrong answer. It's not like they believed that the group was right. But despite knowing that the group was wrong, most of them chose to give the wrong answer. They did not want to stand out. This is the key reason or the key explanation why someone gives a wrong answer. Because they don't want to look odd in front of the group. That's why. Not because they believe that the wrong answer is the right answer. So, what we had learned yesterday, like I told you, keep on linking, keep on connecting to see the larger meaning of things. What we had learned yesterday under compliance was that group pressure is a very strong factor for conforming. This is what Ash has proved, and he's verified it by asking participants, and they're saying the very same thing. What comes under compliance, that they felt they will stand out. They did not want to be the odd person. Also, we saw under normative social influence that this desire of approval, or at least not being rejected or not being standing out, is a reason why people conform. So again, that gets verified from participants' own mouth. We get to hear that this is the reason they were conforming. There was a very small number which started doubting their perceptions. Very few people were like this. Again, they did not believe as such that the wrong line was the correct line, but they thought maybe they are not being able to see properly. Like they start doubting their own eyes or their own vision, that how come it is that only they are seeing this as the correct answer, say line A, then everyone else is feeling that B is the wrong answer. Are their eyes not seeing things correctly? They came to doubt themselves. So these, most probably we don't know, but these must be the participants who conformed very strongly, like the highly conforming type of people. Because if someone comes to doubt themselves only because of what others are saying, like they're so shaken in their own confidence, then very likely they'll yield to group pressure easily. So now, combining what we saw in between about the stress experienced by participants, then the major quantitative results which were there, and finally what participants reported at debriefing for that small interview. This totally makes for the results of the study. So you can remember this as the results section. What you need to memorize, you can always highlight specially and keep it. 37% is a key result that you need to memorize, and I would suggest you quote it in the answer which you write. Also, if you can remember, very helpful, 5% showed high levels of conformity. Don't need to remember the exact numbers, but at least the percentage. And 25% showed no conformity, in the sense they consistently resisted the group's pressure. Remaining whatever results are there, like what they said on debriefing or what stress they were experiencing, you don't need to memorize any facts or figures for that. You can report in your own words also if you find it relevant at the time of writing. For this study, what I have posted over here, there's no conclusion. So I'll just quickly write a one-line conclusion. Sometimes in studies you will see, especially in that Oxford International textbook, conclusion is not mentioned explicitly. So you can just write a quick conclusion of your own because the inference is obvious as such. Conclusion always follows the aim of the study. It's not a simple restatement of the aim, but it will be in accordance with the aim. If there's a hypothesis, even better, whether the hypothesis is supported or not. Here we just had a broader aim. Now looking at the results of the study, what can we say about the aim? Have the researchers been able to establish what they were aiming to? That is all we need to say. So here the aim of the study was to look at reactions to group pressure, and the results are telling us that there is conformity to group pressure. Either you can say indicating compliance or indicating social influence. So indicating that conformity is a strong means of exerting social influence. Okay, so in the conclusion of any study, we have to make a broader theoretical generalization from specific results, which we are seeing for that study. So here the theoretical generalization is definitely towards conformity and the larger topic of social influence. So this study is making it clear that yes, conformity is a big source of social influence, and that helps to justify the aim as well. So this is how you can learn about the study. Once you've done this, Ash's paradigm has been used in all his variations. Means what we have marked in the procedure part, that same procedure has been followed in variations of group size, unanimity, whichever you see ahead of this. Only there will be slight modifications. For example, in the group size variations, instead of 6 or 9 other, uh, sorry, 6 or 9 total people being there, whatever it is, 7 or 9, I'm getting confused, but instead of 7 or 9 people being at total in a table, it would be in group size. Sometimes there are 3 people, sometimes there are 15, 30 people. So the remaining part of the procedure remains the same. That is, in all variations also they have to see these 2 cards. They have to do many trials. On every trial they have to answer which is the line which is matching the standard line. All of this remains the same. Only some one part of the procedure will be changed. Or if you take unanimity, in the unanimity variations, on some variations all the confederates give the wrong answer, and on some variations only a few of them give while the remaining give the right answer, or the remaining give some other wrong answer. So you have to know this basic task. Once you know exactly what's done in the original study, then only you understand what's that modification being made in the variation. So that's why, at least even if you don't intend to do this original study, make sure the green part which I've highlighted, you know that well, because that is compulsory for the syllabus. Okay, now I've given you an explanation of the study. Now what we will do is write the answer, essay answer for this one. Some quick guidelines about how to write the essay answer before we write it. As such, if you want even more details, in other videos for AQA in which I've discussed how to write exam answers, I have explained these things. If you are writing a 20 marker of this question, outline and evaluate research, AO1 is going to be for 8 marks and AO3 for 12 marks. This is applicable only to international curriculum. So you will have to structure your answer considering this breakup of marks. If you're writing a 16 marker, so you're from the UK curriculum, you will have to write AO1 for 6 marks and AO3 for 10 marks. If you're writing a 12 marker, again for the UK curriculum or can be for international also, then you have to cover AO1 for 4 marks and AO3 for 8 marks. A simple way of thinking about it, AO1 has less weightage, that is description has less weightage than evaluation. Evaluation is more important. Now the next thing is, how many points should we write? As far as AO1 is concerned, description, you should give a good summary of the study in the aim, procedure, results and conclusion format. So instead of counting the points, I strongly suggest you make sure you are summarizing all the relevant sections well. Just keep your focus on writing all the relevant points for each of the 4 sections which I have pointed out. So structure your AO1 in that way regardless of how many marks it is for. When it comes to AO3, you need to give Peel points, as you know. Firstly, make sure you're writing detailed evaluation. If you're still not clear on Peel, you can watch any of my past videos. In those, I have explained what is Peel. Or even Peel C points are good. Peel plus counterpoint. Now, for a 20 marker, I would recommend write 4 such points. To justify 12 marks in AO3, you can assume each point is worth 3 marks. It's a rule of thumb. It's not that you have to only give these many points. I'm just giving you a possible structure which can be helpful. For a 16 marker, I would say give 3 such points which can justify 10 marks for your 3. Many students feel 3 is very less for 10 marks because you don't write in enough detail. That's why you feel that way. You feel a need to give too many answers, too many evaluation points, because you really don't go into the depth of any strength or weakness. So you end up writing too much, but the points are very superficial or very shallow. If you're writing detailed points, then even 3 points are enough. In fact, they are good for this 16 marker. Keep in mind, if you write a lot of points, but they are not detailed enough, so say you give 6, 7 points of evaluation, but each you give in 2 lines. So mainly in each point, you're just identifying the strength or weakness and just giving a very brief detail on it without contextualizing. In that case, you're not going to score well. You cannot sacrifice quality for quantity. That's not an option. So I would recommend you write 3 Peel points. If you intend to write 6, 7 Peel points in at a superficial level, you won't score well. And then you'll end up saying, I wrote so much, but I did not get marks. The examiner is not going to count how much you're writing, they're going to see the quality of your answers. Whenever you have the time, do go through past mark schemes and see how scoring is done. I don't know, many students don't do this basic exercise. The scoring is done according to the quality, the nature of the answer which you've written. I'll try to cover it in a video ahead. It's not done according to the number of points. That's not a consideration at all. Like nowhere in the mark scheme you'll see that if a student writes 10 evaluation points, we'll give them more marks than a student who writes 2 evaluation points. So don't have that outlook. Coming to the 12 marker, I would recommend you write 2 or 3 such points, up to you how much you can write. Even 2 will suffice for a 12 mark. Okay, so now the answer which I'm going to write, I'll write it from a 20 marker point of view, because that is the highest mark level for which it can be asked. If you're a UK student who will have to write for maximum 16 marks, you can just think of it that I'm writing 4 peel points. Instead of those you could just take up any 3. So you can omit one of the peel points that I'm writing. Rest of your answer can be the same. Okay, so let's start writing the answer. It's a model answer. Your answer does not have to be a replication of mine. Focus on how I'm writing the answer. Mainly as I'm writing, write with me and focus on the terminology that I'm using, what sort of language I use while writing, the way I structure the answer, where I write AO1, where I write AO3, especially each AO3 point. How I structure it in a peel format, focus on that. And of course, I'll give you more guidance as I'm writing the answer. So focus on terminology, structure. Do not focus on length, number of words, number of points written. Those are immaterial. This is what is important. And besides terminology and structure, also focus on the contextualization, because it's understood, but that's the key thing that is missing. So I want you to note explicitly how every point which I give is not a generic point. Every point I relate with Ash's study, be it description or evaluation. Especially keep your focus on that. That is where most students lose marks. Okay, so let's start writing the answer now. Okay, so since I'm typing the answer here neatly, so that is why I will put it on my website also. And you can download a copy for it. I will link it in the description box and pinned comment below. So if you need it for future reference, or even better, as I'm explaining to you how to write the answer, if you want to keep a copy of it in front of you, you can definitely do that. Okay, so let's answer this question beginning with AO1. Ash aimed to investigate the effects of group pressure on behaviors of individuals. So I'm beginning with the aim of the study. I don't have to explicitly write it, this was the aim of the study, but I have as such used the word aim, and becomes clear that I'm starting at the right point with the aim. My wording need not be exactly what we have seen right now. It can be in my own words, as long as I'm using good terms while writing and there's clarity to what I'm writing. Okay, so 123 participants were recruited. I can add male participants were recruited for the study and instructed to perform a task of visual perception. They were seated at a table with 6 or 8 other participants. I'm putting participants in quotes because we know that these are not participants. And I'm going to explain it ahead. So yeah, I'm just putting in quotes. So they were seated at the table with other participants and shown. So now I'll start introducing the task. 2 cards, one with a standard line. This I'm putting in quotes because this is the term which has been used in the original study by Ash. So just to highlight that. And one with 3 comparison lines. They were to answer which of the three comparison lines matched in length with the standard line. Unknown to the participants, the remaining individuals at the table were assistants of the researcher who were trained in deliberately giving the wrong answers on 12 of 18 trials. These 12 were referred to as critical trials. Each individual reported their answer out aloud such that the naive participant's turn to answer would be last or second last. This created group pressure as the correct answer was obvious, but the participant was exposed to several wrong answers before his turn to answer. This sentence which I have just given is key, because this is the key manipulation. This is where group pressure has been exerted. And conformity is about group pressure, so make sure you're writing very explicitly about this manipulation, just like I have done. Also note that whatever I had written while annotating about deception and all those things, I'm not including in AO1. They are not a part of AO1. Like I had said at that time, they can help you in evaluation. So when I come to AO3, I'll be making use of those points. AO1, as you can see till now, it's just straightforward writing what we have learned about the study in good terms, and like you can see, I'm following the structure of aim, procedure, results. So that is what needs to be done here. It's very simple. Okay, then we can talk about the results, because now we have explained the key manipulation. Results indicated that on 37% of the critical trials, participants gave the wrong answer in accordance with the majority. Also, 5% participants always gave wrong answers on the critical trials, showing high levels of conformity, while 25% never gave the wrong answers, showing strong resistance to conformity. It could be concluded that conformity is a strong means of exerting social influence on individuals. So if you've learned the topic well, if you've understood it well, you can see in a flow you're able to write very quickly AO1. There's no big deal. Like just like I wrote it, you can also note it very quickly. If you're feeling the answer is very long and when you highlight, you won't be able to write so much. Some of the details you can skip, such as here about this result. It's not the key result. You can skip out this. And you can also skip out some things about if you're feeling it's becoming too lengthy, you can skip about like how many participants were seated at the table. You could just say many of them were there. You need not mention the exact instruction which was given at the beginning. That's fine. You can skip out some of those details if you feel you'll not be able to cover so much on time. However, mainly what determines whether you're able to write quickly or not is how well you know the answer, whether you've learned it well enough and whether you've practiced well enough, more than exactly how many words you're writing. So I would suggest keep your focus throughout the year on understanding things well. That will automatically increase your speed. And of course, writing answers practice is very, very important. That you cannot miss. Like you just cannot keep on reading or annotating and assume you'll be able to write well. You actually have to write down answers for practice. So what I've covered here, this is for AO1. It's a summary of Ash's study. They have asked in the question, outline and evaluate research into conformity. So when we practice, many times students ask me, but they've just said research. So don't we have to give all the variations by Ash? No, they've told you research means they're being very flexible. Otherwise, they would have told you directly what they want. They be very specific in their questions if that is what they want. So when they say research, they're leaving it to you. You want to cover all the variations, you want to cover only the original study, you want to cover some theory instead of the study, that is up to you. So it's my choice to write only about Ash's original study, and that's perfectly acceptable. There's no issue with that. So this is EO1, and I don't need to justify why I have taken Ash's study for the answer. So I don't need to write explicitly, oh, I'm discussing only the original study. I can directly just write about Ash's study like I have written here. Now coming to EO3 evaluation. Firstly, yes, organization point of view, take a separate paragraph for it so that it's evident. You don't need to write that this is evaluation or give a heading or anything, but just separate it from the descriptive part. Here we'll write answers in Peel format. I won't exactly discuss what is Peel today. I don't have the time for that, but you just keep on seeing how I'm using that format. One thing that I want to discuss about the study in terms of its strengths is the validity, which is very high, which makes the overall conformity theory very credible. I think that is a strength which is really worth discussing. There are many strengths and weaknesses in any study. You're free to discuss any of them. There is no restriction on which strengths and weaknesses you have to discuss. But in my mind, on a preference basis, I like to discuss those strengths and weaknesses which are like major points rather than minor points. So I would like to discuss internal validity. One strength of this study was the high degree of control that was maintained. For example, participants were not informed that the study was about conformity. They were also kept blind to the fact that they were sitting with research assistants rather than actual participants. Most importantly, the task given to participants was such that the right answer was apparent. So there was no possibility that participants genuinely gave wrong answers out of not being able to figure out the right answer. What I want you to note so far is how I have signposted the point by saying that this is a strength. I have begun very directly with the point, and then I've given very explicit contextualized examples of what controls are there. So I've not just left it as, okay, there's a control because this was a lab experiment, so there were many controls and that is why validity was there. No generic responding, very explicit responding to what is there in the study. This ensured that wrong answers were given only because of group pressure and not because of any confounding variable such as confusion about the right answer. This increased the credibility of conformity as a factor in social influence. You can also use the term internal validity instead of credibility. Yes, my point can be a little wordy. When you're writing, your points can be a little more limited in words. That is bound to happen. When you learn from a textbook or when you learn from a teacher's model answer, when you write, your words will be less. So it's good if I'm using a few more words or writing a few extra examples. You need not write all of them in the paper. But if I write very less, so if I write a very short answer just to meet word requirements and all, then you will not get a full understanding of how to think. And like I said, my focus is on how to think rather than what to write. So that's why take my answer with the assumption that yes, it's a little lengthier than what is required, but that is for your understanding. So this is what I wanted to see, is how I've signposted, how I've given explicit examples, then how I've explained that what I've written, why it is a strength, and then finally I've concluded by linking it to credibility. So typical Peel format I have followed. Another point which I feel is very relevant to this study is that there is use of quantitative data, which really increases the objectivity of results. Again, a very strong, like, major point for validity. So another strength of the study was the collection and analysis of quantitative data. So again, I need to point out what is the quantitative data. Frequencies of answering incorrectly on critical trials were calculated and converted to percentage to derive the rate of conformity as being 37%. So this is the quantitative data that was collected. So explanation in the Peel format. Now to explain why this is a strength. This helped in objective interpretation of the degree of conformity in participants without any researcher bias. Thus, results regarding the significant extent of conformity to group pressure have strong internal validity. Again, it's my personal preference. There's no hard and fast rule, but I like to balance between strengths and weaknesses. So now that I've given two major strengths of the study, I'll also give two major weaknesses. So if I were to write a 20 marker, I would have written in this way. For a 16 marker, because it's odd, you have like 3 evaluation points, strengths and weaknesses. You could either take 2 strengths, 1 weakness, 2 weaknesses, 1 strength, whatever is your preference, or it can be all strengths and all weaknesses also. Though I personally feel that's an imbalanced answer. Also, if you feel that you're being restricted, like you just have to write 2 or 3 points and that's why you're getting restricted in terms of strengths and weaknesses, you can also give counterpoints within a strength or weakness to make sure that it gets more balance. Like for example, where we've spoken about validity and we have said that validity is there because of control. You could also simultaneously give an example of something that was not controlled, which could have potentially confounded results. Like one example could be, I didn't consider it a very major point, so I haven't written, but there is always the possibility that some of the participants understood the true purpose of the study. Because in a lab experiment, it is inevitable that some extent of demand characteristics will be there. So some of them must have understood that the rest of the so-called participants who were there, they were deliberately giving wrong answers. There's no way of ruling out this possibility in this experiment. So you could give it as the counterpoint right after we have given that strength and point out that that is a potential weakness as well as of validity. So it'll extend the peel point into a peel C point and it'll make your answer more balanced. Right now, like I told you, I didn't feel a need for that, so I haven't extended the paragraph that way. Also, to further elaborate on this point which I've given, there's quantitative data. Along with that, there's qualitative data, those secondary observations about stress or what participants reported about why they were conforming. You could add some of that and show that it's not a counterpoint. In fact, it's an additional point that further increases strength of validity. Like there's objective data also, and there's a lot of in-depth data also. So you can elaborate on this point also further. But I would like to talk about separately about weaknesses right now. That's my approach. In terms of weaknesses, firstly, ecological validity is a very prominent weakness of all types of social influence studies, like not only Ash, even Milgram and Dale Latani, whichever we see ahead. So one weakness of the study was lack of mundane realism. Even more than ecological validity, we can point out to the mundane realism missing. The tasks are more unrealistic than the setting. Whenever we talk about mundane realism, I know I say this in every video, but it's very important. Whenever we talk about mundane realism, it is very key for a good answer to give examples of in real life what the tasks would be, like which tasks would replicate real life situations. Giving explicit examples of that is a good way of making your points prominent. Otherwise, when you just write that, okay, this was unrealistic, that was unrealistic, but you're not linking with what would have been realistic, you're missing out on elaborating in like good detail for your point. Like you're not being very explicit. So make sure you're able to give some real life examples, and it's not difficult. You have seen in real life situations where conformity is observed. There's so much given about it in your syllabus. So very easily you could pick up 2 or 3 examples from them. First, point out what is the unnatural task which was used. The task given was of selecting a line matching in length to other lines, which was unrealistic because it was too simple, and the correct answer was obvious. This is only what I have to extend further and link into what would be more realistic. In real life, situations of pressure are not so straightforward. The right answer is typically not obvious in such situations. And now I need to give an example. For example, I can give a queue example, like people are waiting in a queue and it's not obvious whether the queue needs to be followed or not. So something like that, or something like when opinions are being shared, or people are just talking about preferences rather than what is right or wrong. In those situations, there is no right or wrong. There's absolute confusion on what is the right thing to do. So, for example, I can give this one, which is a very prominent example. If a student wants to pursue an irregular career, which their friends and family do not approve of, there is no clear answer to whether or to which career would be the right one to pursue. So in real life, the questions we are confronted with don't have a straightforward answer. So in this example, is the student right? Will it prove to be a good career if she pursues an out of the line career? Or will the family and friends be proven to be correct, and which career they are suggesting that will prove to be the right one in future? We do not know. So it is not like Ash's experiment in which we know what is the right answer. So there is no clear answer to which career to pursue. Now need to explain why this is a problem, why this is a weakness. Therefore, again hypothetically, like what could be the problem here? In real life, the pressure to conform might have an even greater influence on individuals than what was seen in this study. As their own confusion would add to external pressure. Here, what I'm trying to say is in this study, participants knew which is the clear answer. In their mind, they had clarity. So maybe it was a little easier to resist pressure because they know what they are saying is right. But what when we don't know whether what we are saying is right or not? In that case, we might easily yield to pressure. So here there was just 37% conformity. In real life, we might see close to 100% conformity. And all of you must be seeing in your common experience for things like what career to pursue, what to wear, what to eat, how to live life, which goals to pursue in life. There's very high degree of conformity. Almost everyone is doing what the majority is doing without thinking for themselves what they would like to do. So maybe this study has underestimated the degree of conformity which is there in the real world. This reduces the generalizability of the findings of the study to the real world. Finally, ethics is a strong, prominent problem in this study, but it is something that, like I had mentioned earlier about cost benefit analysis, don't have a very biased way. I've seen students have very strong opinions about ethics, they don't really think about them critically. It's like if there's one instant of temporary emotional distress being caused to somebody in a study, they'll really bash the study because of that. So, like the study was the cruelest thing which could have been done on the planet. That is the way they write about the study. Of course not. It was just temporary emotional distress that was being caused to participant, which was cancelled out in many ways through debriefing, through uh, justifying the purpose to them, and through looking at the larger implications of the results. So don't be highly biased in the way you look at and then inevitably write about things from a study. Critical thinking does not mean criticism, does not mean bashing up whatever you see. It means carefully thinking about the advantages and disadvantages of something. So be open to both sides. In fact, this is one paragraph where I'll show you that yes, ethics is a weakness, but I'll also show you in this paragraph how you're supposed to give a balanced view within a point itself. The remaining points I have clearly taken one side, that it's a strength or weakness. But now, what I'm going to write is going to be both sided, and your evaluation points can definitely be that way. Absolutely. Like I've said before, also you can give counterpoints within points. So there's no compulsion you have to be one sided in any of your points. Before I begin with the ethics point, I just forgot in this mundane realism point, even if you want to add something about that they were exposed to strangers. And in real life, typically pressure does not come from strangers, it comes from friends and family itself. You can definitely write something about that also. That's also very pertinent to this study. Okay, so let's write our final evaluation point on ethics. Another weakness of Ash's research was breach of several ethical guidelines. Again, when it comes to ethics, you always have a choice that you want to focus on any one, say only informed consent, only deception, absolutely. Or you can take multiple of them like I want to take here. Depends what's your intention, what you want to showcase by writing about it. Deception was constantly done with participants being told that the study was about visual perception rather than conformity. With the truth about Confederates being hidden, and with the deliberate interspersing of critical trials within actual trials. Temporary emotional distress was also caused to participants by pressurizing them to yield to wrong answers, this indicates that ethically participants' well-being was not fully ensured in the study. However, now this is where I introduce the counterpoint and say that no doubt ethics have been breached, but it might be justifiable. However, the deception and temporary harm is justified in the face of the larger implications of the results of the study for society. Again, I have to be explicit about everything I'm saying. So if I'm saying there are larger implications, what are those larger implications? There should be no point in the answer which is hanging in the air. Like I'm just saying implications, but I'm not specifying at all what do I mean by it. The examiner should not be left guessing at any point what implications. So I have to write immediately. Whatever I'm suggesting, immediately I have to clarify it. The findings indicate how how group pressure can prevent people from doing what is right, like in this case, giving the right answer, which can be used to create awareness in society about how conformity should be avoided in should be we can say, yeah, conformity should be abandoned when it comes to taking right decisions. Means what I'm saying is that awareness can be created in society using these findings about how conformity can make us do things which are wrong or which are not appropriate, and that's why we need to be careful about in which situation we are conforming. That's very important for good continuation of society. Otherwise, we know society will go downhill if people just keep on conforming blindly. You could also phrase this as it shows how blind conformity can be dangerous. So deception is mitigated because all this like ethical breaching is mitigated because the implications are very good of the study, and therefore now we can conclude the point by saying that therefore there is concern about uh, harm caused to participants, but given that uh, it was not significant or long lasting, it was, we can say, probably not enduring, as they were informed about the true purpose in debriefing. It is acceptable given the larger benefits of the study. Okay, so this is what I would write for a 20 marker on this topic. Outline and evaluate research. Like I have told you, I'm going to put it up on the website also, so there you can read it carefully. Just one or two things I would like to reiterate before ending this video. The model answer which I give, it is a model answer. It's not to be learned exactly. It's to be learned from, you always take it from the perspective of how to write the answer, not like what to write. So again, what I want you, after I've written the answer, I want you to focus on in AO1, Given that I have chosen to write Ash's research original study only for this answer, like this is what I'm preparing for this answer, I have included specifics like exact number of participants, exact results, and all. Because when I've made my mind that this is only what I want to write in the paper, then why not prepare it in good quality with all necessary details. So EO1 I've been very explicit. In EO3 I've written 4 evaluation points. Before writing this answer, I was telling you something about depth versus breadth of points. So you can see each point I have given in a lot of depth. I have not focused on giving too many points. I have focused on giving each point with a lot of clarity and necessary details. So that is ideally how you should write your evaluation points. Also, you can see I have not focused on the length at all. Like some of my evaluation points overall, they look longer, some look shorter. Because like I've told you, that's immaterial. That's a very superficial way of looking at things. The point that I've written on quantitative data is short, but it is fully detailed. The point I've written on mundane realism is long because I've given some more examples and some hypothetical connections. So it's longer. But both are equally effective, both are equally credit worthy because both are fully detailed, fully explained with no room for doubt, and both are contextualized. So here I wanted to see, that's why I've given a variety of points. I wanted to see how lengths can differ. In the last point, I've taken a balanced view on the ethics, not just spoken about how they are a weakness. So some points can be one sided, some can be both sided. The key is clarity in your thought, showing your understanding. In EQ, especially, I told you I'm not going to go too much in the mark scheme, but knowledge and understanding is heavily emphasized. So, in every point, I have focused on showing my knowledge and understanding rather than counting the words or looking at the length of the points I'm giving. And of course, finally, this is for a 20 marker point of view. A 12 or 16 marker can be cut short by mainly reducing the number of EO3 points. EO1, I would suggest to keep it intact, no matter it's a 12, 16 or a 20 marker. Occasionally, there can be a 6 marker also, only outline research into conformity, no evaluation is asked. So, pure EO1 question can come of a similar nature. Once you prepare these essays, that's why everyone emphasizes that you prepare your essays, you're ready for so many of the shorter answers also which could come, because you've prepared a full-fledged essay, one part of it qualifies as a shorter answer as well. So very, very helpful to do this writing practice. So at the end of the video, I'll suggest practice your essays, actually write them down. Definitely look at sample essays from my website, from so many other websites, textbooks, where they are provided, your course companions where they are there, but practice your own essays. Don't rely on reading and memorizing essays. That strategy never works. It's totally ineffective. Your memory does not have that much capacity to learn so many essays which are possible in AQA. Okay, if you have any suggestions or any feedback on these videos or any recommendations for which type of video you want to see, you can leave all of those in the comments box below. I'm also sharing my personal number and email ID in case you want tuition for psychology. Please do not contact me on personal number or email ID to talk about videos. I will not answer over there. So anything about my YouTube channel, you need to post in the comments box below. I definitely answer all relevant comments which come in. Okay, so that is it for this video. Next video, most probably, I don't know when I'll be able to post, but I would continue with conformity. And of course, it would be on variations of Ash's experiment. Like now that we've understood the main paradigm, we'll be very quickly, able to understand all the variations. So how to do that and what spirit to learn that, maybe we can look at it in the next video. Thank you so much for watching this video, and until I see you next time, then goodbye.